What is up, guys? It's the Sound Alchemist, and today I'm back to talk to you guys about Warhammer 40K. This is the first of many videos to come where I will be covering Warhammer 50K, essentially. This is by Lord Lucan, and this is called The Shape of the Nightmare to Come. It's essentially a what-if scenario that is fan-made, that was done a long time ago. I think, if I'm correct, this is around like 2012. So we're going to be looking as to what the overall thoughts were and what Lord Lucan had correct and what was completely off. Now, since this was written such a long time ago, it's going to be crazy to see like what he predicted, because as of this time, Primaris Marines weren't a thing. Like, the events of the Cicatrice Maledictum weren't even thought of. To be honest, this was probably around 5th edition, maybe. 2009, 2010. Yeah, that's 11 years ago. So, without further ado, guys, let's jump into Lord Lucan's The Shape of the Nightmare to Come. As always, we will have links to this article down at the bottom of the description, so you guys can check it out for yourselves and read every bit of amazing detail for yourselves. So, let's get into it. It is the grim darkness of the 51st millennium, and the endless war continues. There was no great battle, no calamities to bring ruin to the universe. Across the vastness of the galaxy, the Imperium simply died. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. The empire of humanity crumbled. Its enemies were far too many, too great, and too terrible to imagine. The great conflict at the Octavius sector had no victory. This was indeed a war without end, a war between the Tyrannid Menace and the Greenskins. The new entity spawned from the fusion of Orc and Tyrannid. War, hunger, these two ideologies meshed together to create a singular desire, a desire to ravage, rape, and remake all in the image of the new Devourer. This new amalgamation, this new apex predator began to spread from the Octavius sector, devouring anything in its path, except for metallic sentinels of unflinching dread, the Necrons. The race of the Eldar, who had held on to life for so long, slowly peered out of existence, one craft world after another, for eventually even the rumbling hearts of the avatars fell silent. For a time, that is. In the dead craft worlds, something began slithering through the infinity circuits. Unfortunately, the great god of the dead, Iniad, is trapped within this circuit, howling its mournful song into the darkness, eternally hungry in its desire to wreak vengeance on the god of perversion, she who thirsts, Slaanesh. The empire of the Tau, naive in their hope of unity, expanded into a realm full of death and decay. Every world they came across was barren. The hard and unpleasant task of terraforming each world turned the Tau into a bitter, self-righteous race. They were disgusted at the actions of their predecessors and vowed to not understand their fellow races, but to simply purge them. Only the Tau could be trusted with worlds. They decided that all others must be cast out. Watching Their patron laughed his sardonic laugh as his puppets began being twisted into terrors. It is at this time that I tell you that the Golden Throne finally failed. No one knew for certain as to why, or what happened to the Emperor. But once the throne failed, there was no vox or astropathic transmission that came out of Terra ever again, for it became engulfed in warp storms. The remains of humanity had neither the power or the manpower to even return to their home. All that is known is that the Astronomicon died with the death of Terra. Eventually the Imperium tried to muster its forces, but the new Devourer and the sudden surge in warp storms began to shatter those dreams like glass. Chaotic cults stampeded through humanity, for with the death of the Emperor, the Inquisition finally lost its facade of unity, and most died, tearing at each other from within. Even the greatest of Inquisitor lords fell to one another. Some who survived seized entire systems for themselves, becoming feudal kings and regents. The Space Marines fared little better. Most chapters disintegrated as their forces, who fought individual missions across the galaxy, found that they could not return to their chapter masters. In the darkness and loneliness, many Marines chose the only path they knew: war. They became rogues, bandits, pillaging Imperial worlds only for the joys that war would bring. It was said that the White Scars and the Raven Guard warbands were the worst, as they were so swift and ruthless. The Black Templars retained the most of their original fervor and merely continued their crusades. They became full-on worshippers of the God Emperor, and the High Marshal declared a new and greater crusade to destroy every human that did not submit to them and to the God Emperor, and might as well just purge everything else. Their zealotry blinded them to their own heresy. As more and more leaderless Marines, desperate for orders and purpose, began following the Templars. Millions of ragtag former Imperial Guard and massive mobs of Imperial cultists quickly joined the Crusades' march across the stars. Soon their depleted numbers, drained from the wars with the new Devourer, had reached nearly 2,000 Astartes, representing the second largest single group of Imperial Marines still in existence. Second, that is, only to the Grand Sicarium. The Grand Sicarium, which used to be Ultramar, was named this for they had a new ruler, Cato Sicarius. His realm became a holy site for the Ultramarine successors. Their fractured remnants gathered around Ultramar like a swarm of flies. Sicarius declared himself the king, decreeing that those under his protection should worship him as the god he was. Those who did not side with him, for example, those who were warriors of Macragge and who thought Calgar would be the new ruler, were struck upon great steel pikes, a grim demonstration of Sicarius' desire to rule all. Ultramar, which looked like a shining beacon to most, became a darker place for many centuries. There were many Forge worlds that still remained operational after the collapse of the Imperium, but they all soon began to fall, one after the other, either to the chaotic cults or the Dragon Cult invasion. Some were ransacked by rival warbands, desperate for stolen technology. These slaves became bartered like currency amongst the various larger petty imperia, as they became known now. Some Forge World simply seal themselves off from the galaxy entirely, their fabricators for once preferring ignorance over knowledge. During this time, chaos became a raging torrent, rising to levels of corruption not seen since the Age of Strife. Worlds were literally dragged into the warp as whole planets were overrun by rogue psychers, madmen, and monstrous space marines. The Chaos Legions eventually became virtually indistinguishable. Some groups slaughtered in the name of the Dark Gods, but most just slaughtered. And then came a war so epic and scaled it literally dwarfed all others. For Abaddon the Despoiler seized a massive swath of space around the Eye of Terror. He was careful not to disturb the new Devourer. And like a skilled swimmer giving a swarm of predatory fish a wide berth, he then had his 200th Black Crusade plunge into the Sol System, and here is where he faced against the army of the Dragon Transcendent, an army of fallen Mechanicus, and those Silver Sentinels, the Necrons. Warp-spawned magic and demonic machinery and weaponry battled arcane weapons of unimaginable power. The vast serried ranks of Necrons and Pariah fought till no end. However, at the end of the day, there was a victor. The dragon had ensured that the solar system was indeed his, except for a single orb of stubbornness, Titan. This stony fortress had its doors sealed, and time again, no one could pry it open. For the faith of the hearts of the Grey Knights and Custodian Guard persevered. This was indeed the last shadow of the Imperium's past glory. In the turbulent energies of the warp, the Chaos Gods also suffered. For with the end of the Emperor, something else stirred. Something was birthed. All thanks to the death of the Carrion Lord on Terra.
This is what killed the Astronomicon. This is the dawn of the 50th millennium, where the Star Child became the Star Father. And that is when the Star Father became one amongst the five, a god of order amongst gods of chaos. For where they spread chaos, he spread oppression. Where their demons were feral nightmares that rend souls, his demons were faceless, enslaving the souls of humans to servitude. This is the 51st millennium. There is no hope here.
And that is a portion of Lord Lucan's The Shape of the Nightmare to Come. Again, links down below so you guys can check out the entirety of this massive fanfiction, but there's a lot to discuss, so let's just jump right into it. First and foremost, when it comes to the Eldar, or the Eldari, as they are now called, he pretty much nailed it spot on. The Eldar are dying, they've been dying, but at this point they are 100% dead, and there is a god in the Infinity Circuit that is just ready to come out and wreak havoc against She Who Thirsts. However, there is no Eldar alive to do this. So, he was 100% right with Ennead. I don't know if Ennead was already teased back in 2012. I want to say no. Like, I know Eldrad had that plan to revive Ennead, the god of the dead, which kind of happened prematurely. The Death Watch came in and whatnot, but I mean, that's pretty much what's I feel is going to happen in the future, but it's not going to happen. The Eldar in general, are a huge percentage of Xeno army that GW sells, and if they completely kill off that race, there's going to be a huge backlash, because you have the Eldar, the Harlequins, the Dark Eldar, Craft World Eldar, the Rangers, you got Autarchs. Like, the Eldar have a lot going for them. They need a huge update. A lot of their models are old and they really need to be revamped, but that's something that GW's slowly been working on, so there's no way that the Eldar are just going to die off. It makes sense lore-wise, and that's where it's going lore-wise, but I don't think that's what will happen. Some way or another, they'll find a way to come back. But if Iniad was not a thing back then, like, he nailed it spot on. Moving on to the Tau, they basically said, for the greater good, nah, fuck that. We're the only ones that matter. We're going to be running the show. You guys better listen. And it also seems that there's something behind the scenes. Near the end of that little clip that talks about the Tau, there's like a god or a puppet master basically twisting the minds of the Tau to do his bidding. Who or what that is, I don't know. But again, I think that's just playing off of the fact that the Tau have been either brain controlled, pheromone controlled, brainwashed into believing everything and anything that the ethereal say. So whether this is an ethereal god, a Tau god that has been manifested in the warp, we don't know yet. But I mean, that the Tau having a god is a theory that is somewhat popular in recent times, but we'll see what the Tau actually get into as we continue the series. But for now, I think he's got a good track record. Now let's jump into the meat and potatoes of this. The Great Devourer is a huge driving force as to what happens in this 50K era. So the Great Devourer is a fusion of the Necrons and the Tyranids that are fighting in the Octavia sector. So this sector, you could basically blame, I believe it was Kryptman, who led a gene stealer to the orcs, and that's what led to the big party, as some of the orcs call it. But they've been fighting for so long with no clear victor that the two decided, if we can't beat them, join them, and they literally fused to create the strongest apex predator around, the Great Devourer. They consume, they fight, and they just do this all across the galaxy. So this is essentially everybody's worst nightmare come manifest. There's no surviving this guy. If you want to live, you stay out of its way. Unless you're a Silver Warrior, aka a Necron. So the Necrons seem to be immune to the Great Devourer for one reason or another, as he stated that worlds are barren except for Silver Warriors. So if there is a tomb world on a world that the Great Devourer has eaten, they remain intact. They have also basically allied somewhat with the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Skitarii forces, because they have unified under one god, and that is the Omnissiah, or how he calls it, the Dragon God, the Void Dragon. So in his timeline, the Silent King never came back. The Void Dragon under the Martian sands was not fractured into many shards. It is the entirety of the Void Dragon, and that is what's leading this other massive faction in this galaxy. I don't think that's going to happen for multiple reasons. Again, the whole business side of 40K will not let that happen. Essentially have three factions fuse into one, or have the orcs and the Tyranids fuse into the Great Devourer. That's not going to happen. But again, this is really amazing, really thought-provoking theories that you could have a whole like slew of videos just try to interpret and decipher and just think of different scenarios. So all in all, like, that all makes sense, and it'd be really cool to theorize about it. And then we come to the Imperium and the Space Marines. So the Space Marines were like, the Imperium is no more, what do we do? well, we do what we know best, and that is war. So they still fight, they still pillage, but they do it more for their own sake. They're not paying tithes to anybody. They're not being put on check by the Inquisitors, the High Lords. So they basically can do what they want, when they want, how they want to do it. It's essentially the Badab War times 100. So if a Space Marine sees something that they want, they're gonna fight for it, and chances are they're gonna get it. I guess you could say there's like two main sides to this. So you have the Ultramar section, which has been, I don't even know how to, it's like, think of it as like Roman times, but like much more grim dark, because it's like power rules all, and Sicarius has that power currently. The other faction is the Black Templars, and how they go on penitent crusades. They're essentially doing that across the entire galaxy, and they've gotten Imperial Guardsmen and other Imperial factions joining them. So it's essentially creating a huge like battle line, just cutting through the galaxy. And if they don't kill you outright, the followers, the Astra Militarum and whatnot, will probably kill you in their wake. So that's another cool thing. But I think the most important thing to note is that there is no Imperium anymore. There is no Order. Order comes in the form of the Emperor, which has discarded his mortal body and has ascended to godhood. That has been a long talked about theory, that the Emperor is indeed becoming the 5th Chaos God, the God of Order, which is kind of, how can be a Chaos God if you're Order? But anyway, he's got angels to his side, which I guess are kind of the equivalent of like saints, and they're faceless golden angels that capture humanity and force them to do, I guess, order, whether that's like creating something, being used as soldiers, or just standing still until they die. Like, the whole thing is just about order. He's going to control you. He's going to dictate how you spend the rest of your life until your soul is devoured by him. And at one point in time, he was the strongest chaos god. But chaos is a wheel, and the wheel always turns. So their power always shifts, and it's always a chaotic flux. And that's really great. So there's about 26 sections in this fanfic. I guess you can call it that, homebrew. And I'm going to be picking out a few certain excerpts and talking about them in the coming days. I'm thinking about doing this maybe twice a week, maybe once, we'll see. But let me know down below what you found the most interesting in Lord Lucan's lore from pretty much a decade ago. Let me know how crazy his predictions came to be, and how crazy his predictions came not to be. So again, I can't wait to see your guys' thoughts. But again, links are all down below. Go ahead and check it out. It's a very, very fun read. But yeah, this is all I got for today. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next one. As always, this has been the Sound Alchemist, part of One Mind Syndicate, signing out.